Hey guys, welcome back to the True North podcast. My name's James McKenzie and I've got Ryan Moore with me. What's up, man?
What's going on?
So we are going to do this podcast a little different than what we typically do. Typically you see us have a guest on and we kind of walk through their story, and we've still got plenty more of those down the road. We've actually got our next one already scheduled. Excited to go through that for you guys in the next podcast. But with this one, we're a little bit late getting this one out. We've had a couple of weeks here where we haven't released a podcast, and that's because it's camp season. We have been doing what True North is known best for, which is put on retreats, camps, and having guys out and seeing lives transformed. And it's been an incredible couple of months, really. And we just kind of want to get all you guys kind of caught up with some of the cool stuff that's happened, what's been going on, and then even some bigger picture stuff of what's been going on with our ministry for this whole year and kind of the direction that God's leading us in. And so first, let's start out with our base camp back in September. So this thing was led by Mike Decker, and we had an incredible staff of guys that did extremely well. We even had some new guys that shadowed and got to learn what it looked like to be on staff. But Ryan, you got to be on staff for that weekend and stay the whole weekend.
Yeah.
What was the feeling, or what was maybe some cool stuff that happened that weekend?
Man, it was such a good camp. I think we had obviously an all-star staff helps. We had a lot of shadows, which is super exciting because those, we're bringing those guys into the fold. But I think if there was a theme for the camp, it was just love. Like God just wanted to love on these guys. He wanted to love on these guys through us. And it worked. I mean, it was a really special camp. A lot of young guys. There's a big group of young dudes there. And we're kind of seeing that too, which is exciting because before, like even if you think about like 2 years ago, there's a lot of kind of middle-aged dudes, from the OKC area and kind of all same demographic, but we had a large group of young guys. And the difference is, I think that they've just had, though they all have stories. So I don't want to belittle the story by saying, well, they're young and they just haven't experienced a whole lot, but it's like they're so uninhibited. Whenever it's like they get it, the light bulb comes on and they get super excited about the gospel message and the way that it's presented at base camp.
Well, and what's been a thing we hear from all these men in their 40s, 50s, 60s that come to base camp all these years, oh my gosh, if I would have had this message as a young guy, and we're seeing that, like that's legitimately changing, I'd say over the past, year and a half, 2 years, like our numbers of guys in their late teens, early mid 20s, it's like something's happening. We actually noticed it with like our t-shirts, right? Like we're like, man, we're giving away a lot more medium t-shirts now. It's like, we've got a lot younger guys that haven't put on the husband weight yet,
they don't have the dad bods yet.
Not the dad, no dad bods. Whereas we used to hardly go through medium shirts at all. But how awesome is that guys are starting to get this message at a young age, and then they're going back and sharing it with their friends. That's so cool.
And they're bringing them. So super exciting. Of course, we had a ton of baptisms. We did one group of baptisms. I think it was like,
I think there was 12.
12. But then a smaller group of those younger guys stayed back, and it was like, I should have, but I didn't, but I feel like I need to get baptized. And so they baptized each other. So like 6 more dudes got baptized, even after the main group left and was kind of cleaning up. And so they came back and they were like, hey, just wanted you to know we baptized some more folks. So, they're putting their stake in the ground. Like this is new. I'm recommitting, and I want to live sold out for Jesus. And so, it's just super cool to see. And I hadn't been to a camp for a while. So just the conversations throughout the weekend and just being in the environment again, it was so good for my soul, So it was a really, really good weekend.
Yeah, we had a good turnout too. There was about 100 guys there.
Hmm.
A lot of first timers,
Yeah.
man. At all our camps now, that's another thing that's happening. It used to be kind of 50-50
Yeah.
of like guys that had been before and then guys that are first time. We're seeing closer to like 65, 70%
Hmm.
of guys are first time
Yeah.
campers. And that's just so encouraging to see.
Yeah.
And so you guys, we do have another base camp in Oklahoma coming up here in just a couple weeks, November 7th through the 10th at Camp Wow. So be thinking about who you know that needs to come and be there, and
Yeah.
like they're going to be welcome. They're going to feel welcome because we're catering to a lot of first timers. And
Yeah.
man, I really love Camp Wow. I love their
They
setup. Their staff is always incredible.
they do so great. They treat
Yeah,
us so well. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just a good place to spread out. Everybody's got their own personal space,
Hmm.
and it's just we're really blessed to have that camp.
Yeah.
And so after that camp, the next week, we had actually it's 2 weeks after that,
Right.
we had Kansas base
Hmm.
camp. And so this is, I think, our fourth Kansas base camp to do. And these base camps have been smaller so far to start
Yeah.
out with. And the cool thing about this one is that we had a team of guys that all live in the Wichita area that were leading this or like learning to lead this base camp. So we had our Oklahoma guys go up and
Yeah.
start training these guys, and they all got moments throughout the weekend to lead and respond and share their stories. And we heard that that was really incredible. And I know a lot of these Kansas guys listen to this podcast, and we just want to thank you for your commitment
Yeah.
to getting this message out to the people of Wichita. And we're excited to see it grow. We're really empowering those guys to take it and run with it, make it their own. We've already got the Texas guys and Joe Altabomber, who, I mean, he feels that whole thing himself. It's wild.
Yep.
And we're kind of looking, hopefully, getting the same thing going up in Kansas. So that I heard that was a great weekend as well. I think they had 2 or 3 baptisms
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
And so super successful weekend where
Yeah.
guys encountered God.
Yeah.
And I also like it is a smaller camp, and there's just such beauty to being in a small camp like that and have
Hmm.
the intimacy of actually getting to have conversations with every guy that's there in attendance,
Yeah.
which is just super cool and special
There's something
for the
really
team.
special about those smaller camps.
Yeah,
But I think too the big win there is those local guys got to step up and lead.
yeah,
And so and that's really the heart. Our heart is to empower these guys to just take this message
yeah,
through sharing their stories, through responses, but then just in general,
yeah.
like our story is the gospel message.
Hmm.
It's a modern day gospel. And so when you share what Jesus has done in your life, nobody can argue with that.
Yeah,
And so, but those guys really stepped up and took the lead, and they're gonna do so well.
yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
That makes me want to talk about something with True North. And I'm sure there's a lot of you guys that have been to camp and you're like, how do I become involved in a deeper level and serve True North? We have guys all the time come and
Yeah.
say, I'll push a broom. I'll do whatever,
Yeah. I'll mop the floors.
whatever you need us to do, whatever you need me to do. I want to do that. And our heart is absolutely come alongside us and do that. But we're also not, we're kind of shifting some expectations with it. And um, it really is more of an invitation now of come alongside us, not
Hmm.
not a hey, come and do this. It's more of hey, walk with us.
Yeah.
And I think our plan going forward is to take more intentional time to invite you to walk with us, Ryan and myself, and then
Hmm.
even some of our staff that's been around for a long time. Walk with us. Like, let's start having coffees. Let's start having lunches. Let's
Yeah.
let's become involved in each other's lives, and then whenever you do get implemented into being a part of a camp team, uh, we know each other,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's a little shift we're making. Um, anything else you want to add to kind of what that looks like to be a volunteer?
No, I think, well, it's part of the discipleship thing, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we do have guys that have been involved with True North for a long time, and we see them at camp,
Hmm.
and that's it. But I think what we would love to see is for us. I mean, and there's pockets. I mean, we have, of course, men's groups that have been going for decades, and other things, and so those guys are in community. But as far as True North as a whole, I think I'm excited about creating opportunities for guys outside of camp
Yeah.
to get together and build the community more and more, um, to really push things deeper, push relationships deeper, push to challenge each other spiritually, in our walk, and so much happens in those environments because you see. I mean, you and I even like we see guys who are just in a different place spiritually, and you're like, I want that,
Yeah.
and it prods you on, like,
Yeah.
not necessarily something to do or to work for,
Yeah.
but like it makes you realize that that's available.
Hmm.
So much of my story is like just talking to a guy and he says something and I'm like, I want that.
Yeah.
Like whatever God's doing in their life, it's like that's amazing.
Hmm.
I want more of that,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I think the big thing for this is that for you that is sitting there saying, how can I serve? Um, First of all, knowing that it is a process.
Mhm.
It's not we are not a plug and play type of setting where you just raise your hand and we plug you right in.
Yeah.
And I know that can be discouraging for some. I've had those conversations
Yeah.
of guys that just want to hop in, but we believe that we're going to be around for a long time and we're going to
Mhm.
be doing this for a long time, and we want to have kingdom eyes on what all is going on with True North. And so if you've come to base camp and you're just fired up about it, number one, bring people with you. If you want to answer the question of how you can serve True North,
Yeah.
that's the number one thing is think about who is in your circles and how can you get them to base camp. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, if you truly do feel called to being a part of leadership or a part of just the teams that put these on, like I said, we invite you to come and walk with us. Reach out to us. Email us at info@truenorth.live.
Mhm.
Tell us you're interested in serving with us and walking with us, and we will invite you into that journey. And we're going to have a kingdom mindset with it of keeping you around for 5, 10, 15, 20 years of being a part of True North instead of just throwing you into the fire right now
Yeah.
and getting you burnt out here in about 9 months. Like we're not
Yeah.
interested in that game. And so I'm excited for the kind of this transition and how we shepherd
Mhm.
new volunteers.
Yeah.
And as far as volunteering goes at camp, like I always tell guys, we have an audio video team that does all the production. We've got an admin team and we admin slash host team. They are responsible for check in and room assignments and taking care of snacks and drinks. And then you've got the prayer team that is basically setting up boundaries all around camp and they're
Yeah.
interceding for the campers before they even get to camp. And it's a really beautiful team to be a part of. And then you got your camp directors, which are typically guys that have been around for a while
Mhm.
that get invited into that role. And so you have all that to look forward to. Like I said, email us if any of that spurs your interest, and we'll get you plugged in
Yeah.
because we're excited about taking that journey with you. Next, we had the Frontier.
Yeah.
And so the Frontier this past month was led by Mike Decker as well.
Mhm.
And Mike felt led to show a message on fasting, which was really interesting because um, I've sensed seasons within True North where like fasting's been kind of a topic of conversation, but it's
Mhm.
been a couple years really.
Yeah.
But like going into that particular base camp in Oklahoma and then even the summit, like there was so much fasting going on, including like I felt the call personally before I
Mhm.
heard from anybody to step into fasting. But then it's like everybody else was hearing about that as well,
Yeah.
and so then Mike hears that's what we need to talk about for the
The Frontier.
frontier.
Yep.
And so he shared a message from Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. Just an incredible series. If you guys haven't heard of it, go check out practicingtheway.org. That's their website. So
Yep.
many resources. But he did the session on fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were there at that frontier
Yeah.
that Monday night. Well, tell us a little bit about what you experienced and maybe how the crowd experienced that.
You know, it was interesting because I think Mike asked the question at base camp in September, like how many guys have fasted, right? And several hands popped up, and then he asked who fast regularly, and I think it was like one or two people raised their hand, and so it's certainly something to be talked about, and I think that was probably some of the prompting is like, man, we need to talk about this because it is one of the most powerful ways
Mm-hmm.
to connect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whenever you sort of deprive yourself and intentionally seek union with God
Yeah.
through a bit of suffering,
Yeah.
really,
And praying with your
intentional,
body.
yeah,
Yeah.
intentional suffering and expressing your submission physically,
Yeah.
right? And so it was interesting at the frontier. I think that a lot of the guys probably the big takeaway was that, you know, in certain circles, it's like the Daniel fast, or I'm fasting from social media, or this or that. And John Mark, I think, even says it in his video. He's like, that's abstaining.
Yeah.
You know, you're abstaining from something, which is good, but it's not fasting,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is like depriving your body of food,
Yeah.
essentially. And we can do that for quite a long time, especially most of us, like I carry several meals around my waist. So like, I mean, it's okay. You're going to be okay. Even though you may feel like you're not going to be
Yeah.
okay. It's, but yeah, I mean, he just continually, like, it's one of the most powerful ways to connect. And so, but yeah, it was interesting listening to the group discussion and guys talking. I think when you think of fasting, it's more like abstaining from
Mm-hmm.
something, which is also healthy.
Yes.
Is to have a break from things and then be intentional for your prayer time. You know, the time that you would normally, you know, get on social media, you pray instead. And that's a good practice to get
Yeah.
into. So he talked a little bit about the differences there, but it was interesting because actually in one of my men's groups, we talked about fasting just a couple weeks before that frontier. And my experience with fasting had been more for just health reasons. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff that
Yeah.
happens biologically when you fast. And so I know it's healthier and all those things, but you know, that's a completely different mindset to go into fasting. And honestly, I've fasted multiple times before camps, and it's difficult for me to get out of the mindset of it's just healthy physically,
Mm-hmm.
right? To seeking union with God.
Yeah.
And so that's been kind of a shift that, if I'm being honest, like it's been difficult
Yeah.
to do that for me,
Yeah.
like my mindset around it. But it's important.
Yeah.
It's important. But I think a lot of guys' eyes were open. We just did the first session, and there's actually 4 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And the second session actually covers a lot of the like biology of fasting and why it's healthy and things like that, things that happen. And God created us, like, I mean, just incredible. Our bodies are incredible. And it's crazy to me at how, you know, things he tells us to do. When you fast, right? He just assumed we would fast,
Yeah.
first of all. And
There's
then
never a command. That's
Not
what
a
John
command.
Mark points out. There's never a
Yeah.
command
Yeah.
in Scripture to fast,
right.
but Jesus just assumed that we would.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you fast, right? He assumes that we will, but it's also like there's all these ancillary benefits
Mhm.
to doing it. And so, yeah, I would encourage you guys to check it out. We actually have the link on the app, on the True North app,
Yeah.
under the Frontier on the toolbar on the bottom. There's a little fire there. It says Frontier. We have the PDF that has all 4 lessons
Yeah.
on that. And then of course you can go to practicingtheway.org and watch the videos
Yeah.
and stuff. So, but it's super good. They have awesome. I love John Mark Comer.
Yeah.
He's an incredible teacher.
Yeah, and he's, if you do lead a small group, like that's an excellent resource because I believe there are 9 practices,
Hmm.
and each practice has 4 studies, and so that's 36 weeks of content, and it's extremely rich content,
Yeah.
easy to grab a hold of and understand, but man, it's so centering on
Hmm.
the way and life of Jesus
Yeah.
and how we can follow in Jesus's footsteps. And so I think we as True North, this is something like we feel called to potentially host something someday where
Hmm.
we can take guys through practicing the way content
Yeah.
and use that as part of our discipleship program because it's really good. So yeah, go and check that out. And for me, fasting, it's been interesting because uh, before that September base camp, I felt that God was calling me to fast, and it was actually a 72-hour fast. And I had done some pretty successful fasts since becoming a Christian, and where I've been centered and it's gone well, and I've done the hard thing. But I'd say the past 2 years, like I've felt the call several times, and I've just gone so half in on it and
Yeah.
just end up compromising it early on and not following through or doing it because typically like I take it usually pretty serious about like if you're fasting like not to talk about it, like don't show people that you're suffering, like
Yeah.
I really like that element of
Hmm.
fasting, and so I've typically tried to do that. But on the flip side, I'm not accountable to anybody, and
Right.
so I've been really weak in it.
Yeah.
And so I feel God calling me to this 72-hour fast, and I'm like, oh man! And I was pretty sure it was what I was supposed to do, and
Hmm.
I'd gotten into pretty unhealthy eating habits, and I was having a hard time abstaining from much really.
Yeah.
So he calls me to do this, and it's all leading into base camp. The day of base camp would be when I would break the fast,
Right.
and so I do that 72 hours, and obviously the first 36 hours are miserable. And then you kind of get acclimated
Hmm.
and kind of roll into Thursday. And I remember eating the first meal. I took some time just privately to just thank God for, providing and giving me provision through that. But uh, I celebrated that weekend, feasted because base camp is a feast. It's a celebration for life change and all that. And so, but then the following Monday, I felt that it's not a Daniel fast, maybe
Yeah.
as according to John Mark Comer, but kind of stepped into that healthy eating style
Yeah.
of just fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and I added lean meats to it, not
Hmm.
my normal like barbecue slathered and all the sugary sauces on it, but like
Sure. Yeah.
good clean meat. And so that's what I wanted to do up all the way until the summit, which was about a little over 21 days.
Hmm.
And so I stepped into that. And then simultaneously, a part of the fasting practice is to actually have 2 days of fasting, which is just water only
Yeah.
during the week. I had already planned on doing one day.
Right.
And this is something I'd started many times and I've
Hmm.
never would follow through on. Well, finally, during this Daniel fast, I got really serious about it. And I'm now on I think I've done 4 weeks in a row where Sunday at 6 p.m. is my last meal until Monday at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And I've just had liquid only
Yeah.
between those two times. And honestly, guys, we're looking at the past month of having a lot of different types of fasting.
Hmm.
And I can honestly say, like, I can't point to anything profound that has happened or that's changed, but all I can do is look inwardly and I'm like, okay, spiritually, I feel way healthier.
Hmm.
My body actually feels healthier. I'm one of the guys that whenever I've done diets in the past, like people are always like, "Oh, don't you feel so much more energy?" And I'm like, "No, I still feel the same, except I'm not getting to eat good stuff."
Yeah.
Well, this time, genuinely, my body's feeling better,
Yep.
and so I'm really And it really broke some of the cycles in my mind of how unhealthy my eating habits had gotten.
Yeah.
And it's been really easy since leaving the summit, which was just a week and a half ago, to actually stick to a healthy eating habit.
Hmm.
So I'm really thankful for that. And so, like you said, the physical part of it
Yeah.
is so true. But then the spiritual side of it for me, there's been so much fruit from that. And so my encouragement, the reason I start to share that is dig into the practicing the way stuff. Like check that out for
Yeah.
yourself. Give it a chance because I believe it'll bring you closer to God.
Yeah.
And it'll help you bring you closer to your calling as well.
Yeah. One of the challenges from the frontier was that, like, talking about the early church, they fasted Wednesday and Friday.
Hmm.
So from
And that was up
dinner.
to like 200 years ago. That was like
Yeah.
completely standard thing for the church.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think a lot of guys left that frontier, and they were like determined,
Yeah.
like at least one time a week to do a 24-hour fast.
Yeah.
Um and so it'll be interesting to see what the fruit will be of that.
Yeah.
Because it's good. I mean, it's an active discipline. And I think, it's one of those things. But anytime you start anything, right, it kind of cascades,
Hmm.
especially if you're doing something physical. Like if you start working out, you you tend to want to eat healthier so that your workouts matter. and
Yeah.
and then but then it kind of cascades into other things. You get more organized in other areas of your life, and with your schedule and with your quiet times, and so it kind of just snowballs
Hmm.
as you continue the discipline. If you stay consistent, um it just works,
Yeah.
so it's good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
What I love too about something that John Mark Comer will teach you about in the Practicing the Way series as a whole, and it's actually kind of from Dallas Willard's Spirit of the Disciplines, is that these disciplines are not legalistic. These
Mm-mm.
disciplines are actually like the trellis for the grapevines to grow on, right? Like if you don't put trellises out for grapevines, they just grow on the ground and they get
Mhm.
trampled and eaten by bugs. But if you give them a trellis to grow on, they'll grow upwards and they'll produce good fruit. And it's the same
Yeah.
for us. Like that's what fasting and all these other practices do for us. It's a trellis and a really important practice that I think True North culture and the way we feel like we want to shepherd the guys in is towards these practices so that we can grow deeper roots, be healthier, and
Mhm.
produce really good fruit.
Yeah.
So,
That's really good.
so that was the frontier.
Yeah.
And then I think I actually got it back mixed up because the frontier was actually the Monday after the summit. But
Yeah.
we can go ahead and go into the summit. Um, this was your first summit to go to since we made kind of the changes
Yeah.
to the format of the weekend, which is like we added in some story group times and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience with this one compared to past summits that you've been to.
Yeah, well, I think, the early summits were great. The content is amazing, and the content was the same,
Yeah.
right? But how we used our time as, quiet time, or in this case, group time, um, it just created an environment where you can really connect with guys.
Hmm.
So much of, I don't know, so much happens whenever you hear another man's story,
Yeah.
like his full story,
Yeah.
right? And so we allowed a lot of time, for guys to just kind of tell their story. And it was, in some instances, it's kind of like they can get most of their life in there, and sometimes it's like just a section of their story. But then you tend to understand people better
Yeah.
whenever you understand where they've come from, and
Yeah.
what they've experienced, and what God's doing in their life, and what God has done in their life. And so, it's really, really faith building. But then also just listening,
Yeah.
and doing the listening prayer, and kind of seeing what God has to say about them and their story.
Hmm.
Um, Again, is amazing,
Hmm.
because God shows up, and sometimes it doesn't quite make sense to you, but you step out in faith, and you say what God's laid on your heart, and it
Hmm.
fits, and it means a whole lot to them. And so it's an environment where you can flex that muscle in a safe space,
Hmm.
and I think as Christ followers, we need to be more bold outside of that environment and really speaking life into people.
Yeah.
Um, but that environment creates confidence and faith to be able to do that
Yeah.
elsewhere. And so I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love the summit. Honestly, there's a string of sessions. I think there's 3 different sessions on Saturday at camp that to me just are the heartbeat of what True North is all about and
Hmm.
what we're going after.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't had the chance to go to the summit, man, I couldn't recommend it enough. We won't be doing one again until next fall, but keep on the lookout for that date and
Hmm.
put that on your calendar because it's so phenomenal. I really
Yeah.
love that event. It's just really authentic and genuine. Um, and I really love that. One of the themes, and I think Ryan and I kind of talked about this before the summit, but it was kind of a theme of the weekend. And this isn't calling a single person out because it was a large group of people, but the attacks on marriage that's happening
Mm.
right now
Yep.
is pretty insane.
Yeah.
And especially like on good men.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not the obvious stuff. It's not the affairs or the addictions that are like being just like brought to light or anything like that.
Right.
It's a lot of marriages that are just the wives don't feel seen, they don't feel pursued
Hmm.
and loved, and it's all a lot of little decisions. And so we want to invite all of you guys in that are listening to this podcast into prayer with us
Mm.
into what's our next step in addressing this, because it seemed like that was a big need
Yep.
that weekend is advice or stuff to help men pursue their wives. I think that there could easily be some podcasts that come out of it.
Yeah.
um, but some of these guys had in the past stories is affairs and
Hmm.
big stuff. And I felt the prompting to tell them that what you're actually going into right now might be the hardest thing that you've ever had to do, because it's just these little decisions every single day
Yep.
to show her that she's pursued and loved.
Yep.
And so I think the reason I share that is just to make everyone aware that you're not alone if
Mm.
your
Yeah.
marriage is experiencing that right now, and that we think that it is an attack from the enemy, and that we can pull our resources together to start fighting back.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah. No. Boy, that was a theme. There was, I mean, just a ton of guys that, and like what you're saying is good men that
Hmm.
love their wives and they follow Jesus, but they're just missing the mark.
Hmm.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, me too.
And but where the enemy gets in is really just that's you know
Hmm.
the I don't want to say agreement or the lies, right? But the wife's like, he doesn't love me, or he doesn't cherish me, or he doesn't see me, and that stuff grows, and because there's not this huge event, um, it can tend to, um, I think, get pretty serious before you realize it.
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest eye opener for me. It's like, wow. Like I probably would have said, because we kind of, I mean, being fully transparent, like Meg and I would say we were kind of running on fumes,
Hmm.
coming out of the base camp in September, kind of going in, and there's always a little bit of spiritual warfare surrounding camps and things. But I would have told you, yeah, we're not in a great spot, but we can, it's always like the next things will calm down next week,
Yeah.
right? Or next
Yeah.
month,
Yeah.
right? But I would encourage you guys, like, take action, because for me,
Hmm.
I didn't realize how dire of like how emotionally dry our relationship actually was.
Hmm.
And so That was the big eye opener. And then,
Yeah.
you think, well, it's just me, right? And I share it with a couple of close brothers, and then figure out they're experiencing the same thing. And then we show up to the summit, and it's like 50% of the camp is and they're on all ends of the spectrum, from like, wife says she wants a divorce to, she says,
Or they're just
she
recently divorced.
yeah,
Yeah.
or they've already gone through divorce, or she's says, you haven't loved me in the last decade, or
Yeah.
whatever, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
wait a minute. And so we need to be praying for our wives.
Yeah.
We need to be praying over our wives and fighting for them spiritually. But then we owe it. Like, we need to be pursuing them well,
Hmm.
no matter how much we're serving other men or men's groups or church or
Yeah.
doing all these things. We need to be really intentional with our wives.
Yeah.
So that camp was interesting to me too, because it was a different, before the summit, at first it was invite only. So these guys have been, it was a new camp. It's our newest event,
Yeah.
or our newest camp rather. And so, these guys had been to the ascent multiple times and base camp multiple times, and we invite them to the summit. So the summit really, I think, kind of curated a lot of um, motivation and steps to become a better leader,
Hmm.
right? This camp was interesting to me because it was a lot of guys who might have only been to one base camp, and then they show up at the summit, and they have all the sort of language and foundation that they need from base camp to totally dive in. But the difference, I think, with this group was that um, there's still like a lot of healing
Yeah.
that needed to happen.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing for me was to see that, even with the summit content, which is pretty deep, is like God shows up with what they need,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't the big thing that came out of this camp. The theme wasn't, I need to lead here, or I need to do this or that. It was like, I need to be with Jesus.
Hmm.
I need to have union with God first.
Hmm.
And then a lot of healing, a lot of emotional healing through
Yeah.
telling their stories and listening prayer and praying through things with guys. So anyway, for me, I don't know if that's making sense to you, but
Yeah.
for me to watch those guys who maybe aren't as far along in this journey, and getting this message that traditionally for us has been given to pretty mature men, um, God still shows up and gives
Yeah.
them exactly what they need.
Yep.
So that was really, really cool to see.
Yeah. I think some interesting notes about the summit too is I've actually recently met with several guys that came to the one in the spring,
Hmm.
and the legitimate difference I can see in them of stuff that they grabbed onto that they learned at the summit
Yeah.
that's changing who they are, not just like a behavior, but it's like literally changing who they are. I am completely blown away.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, we see that happen with base camp because you're going from dead to life. But
Yeah.
then, like, when you talk about deeper discipleship stuff, it's harder to see those big swings in a person just changing who they are.
Yeah.
But man, if I could, my advocation for the summit is like, holy moly, these guys are getting it.
Yeah.
Like, it's beautiful to see because what it is it's this taking the lower seat
Hmm.
and being okay with a 10-year journey
Yeah.
into a life of becoming a king,
Hmm.
a good king. Because so the summit talks about so many of us are given a kingdom way before we're good kings,
Yeah.
and we throw it down the drain.
Yeah.
And this is all about teaching us how we can take time to become good kings so that whenever God entrusts us with the kingdom,
Hmm.
we will be ready to handle it
Yeah. We'll handle
with
it.
him.
We'll handle it well. Yeah.
And
And we'll
so
walk with him.
that's been really cool. And then another thing, talking about the marriages and stuff, first of all, we both advocate for counseling. Like, we've been going through counseling. It's been
Yeah.
tremendously helpful. You guys, if you need recommendations, reach
Yeah.
out to us. Uh, get in counseling. Absolutely. I've actually sent about 5 or 6 guys recently to mine, and
Yeah.
it's crucial. You need to do it. Quit holding off. Get in.
Yep.
Get this stuff sorted out. And then secondly, I actually think that the frontier we're doing in November 11th, um, is really phenomenal content. When talking about this, we're going to be kind of talking about how being a good man, or if your goal is to be a good man, it will kill you. John says that in Base Camp. Morgan
Mhm.
Snyder says it in a lot of his content. But in our efforts to become a good man, that will kill you. It
Yeah.
will take you out, when that's your motivation. And so the message for the frontier really addresses that. And that really could help a lot of guys in your perspectives with how your marriage is going and how we can meet her needs. So obviously Summit and this season, we're learning a lot, getting a good temperature gauge on where guys are at. And it was a really, really great weekend. So it was our largest one we've had so far. We had
Yeah.
37 guys, and like 25 of them, this was their first ever summit.
Yeah.
And only a few of those guys had even been to the ascent. So a lot of them, it was their
Yeah.
first ever advanced camp for us. So it was really beautiful.
Yeah. It was
Really
awesome.
great weekend.
That was a good number of dudes too.
Yep.
Yeah, and actually, I think the two guys who had been to the summit before ended up having to leave because of a family emergency, and
Yeah.
so basically outside of the staff,
Yeah.
that was everybody's first summit.
Yeah.
So it was a different dynamic, but it was really, really, really special.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that is what all we've had going on for the past couple months. We're going to go ahead and end this podcast here because that was a lot. And we are going to wait till next week. And our podcast next week will be about the narrow path that we feel that God has true north on, and what that looks like, and what you have to look forward to with that. So join us next week. And for now, we bless you. We hope you have a great week. See you next week.